In response to her plan to end health care protections for consumers with pre-existing conditions, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was heckled from a screening of the Mr. Rogers documentary. And for further punishment, she was then ushered into a theater showing Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom.
President Trump told Jimmy Fallon to be a man. Following Trump's example of a man, Fallon immediately gained 200 pounds and made fun of a disabled person.
Each year, there are anywhere between 70 to 100 shark attacks worldwide, resulting in about 5 to 15 deaths and 1 to 3 Sharknado sequels.
President Trump has threatened Harley-Davidson with an unspecified tax if they attempt to sell motorcycles in the country that are manufactured overseas. Harley-Davidson responded by flicking a cigarette and turning up Highway to Hell.
Brigitte Nielsen has given birth to a baby girl at the age of 54. Congratulations to Brigitte and baby Matlock.
Coco, the famous gorilla who learned sign language, passed away last week. Coco will be memorialized with a 21 poop salute.
The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, yes, that's right. Welcome back to the Trump Report. Here we are on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern. Thanks to all of you watching live on YouTube. Go ahead and join us in the chat. And we have this song because we'll be talking about civility and different people's interpretation
I
of it.
haven't recognized it. What song is this?
This is called Civil War by Guns N' Roses. And as Axel asks at the end of the song, what's so civil about war anyway? And then, of course, at the beginning is the clip from Cool Hand Luke. What we've got here is a failure to communicate, so lots of things that are relevant from a song that I don't even actually like that much. But I'm Christian Bladt, joined as almost always by Tamra Brown.
Almost always. We're a little mixed up today.
In the Scott Moore Memorial seat, he's actually still with us, but we're sitting Shiva for him because he'll be out for a few weeks. Chelsea Galicia.
Hello.
So there's obviously a lot of things to talk about, but where I wanted to start is sort of this line where it's right to take a stand and really go for what you believe in, and then it crosses into rudeness, and then when it gets to be dangerous. So there's different levels of this. We'll start with a widely reported story of Sarah Huckabee Sanders being asked to leave a restaurant, which, you know, I think was handled very politely on both sides, both being asked and her husband just leaving as they were asked to. I think that, you know, you feel like you're standing up for your people because of what they believe in. As a business owner, that's your right. And I think that that sort of, you know, well, we're not going to instead maybe serve you your meal and then have you trapped and talk about issues with you and make you uncomfortable. There's something for that approach. That might also be bad for business. But I wanted to ask the ladies how they felt about this before we move on from it. And I will start with you, Tamra.
I'd say that we stay consistent with the policies that have already been in place, stemming from the bakery that will not make a cake for gay couples. So if we're going to stay with that precedent that it's the discretion of the business owner who they can and cannot serve, then let's just stay consistent with that. That's not even me weighing in one way or the other on my opinion. That's just, I don't see how Sarah Sanders can find this unreasonable when, you know, that's Republican policies that put that into place.
Sure. And I believe the Supreme Court upheld it, which is a nonpartisan body.
Kind of. It's a very, very narrow.
So Ruth Bader
case.
Ginsburg is not a partisan person on that bench, is what you're trying to say? Because Clarence Thomas certainly is.
Where did that come from?
Well, I'm just saying there's very partisan people on there.
I thought we were talking about civility.
Yeah.
So are we? I feel like this is like almost like a stark left turn. I'm like, whoa, where are we going here?
But so I'm saying that the Supreme Court is actually who upheld this policy.
It's not actually. I would like to, if we have time, probably not today, but to actually go through what that said. It did not uphold it in general. It is not a case that
To be
will
fair,
be used
yes.
as
And we
precedence.
talked about that when it happened.
Yes,
that
I believe
that was
was
a case of artistic. It was like a matter of the discretion of the artist cannot. It had something to do with like artistry, right?
Well, that was the argument, but what the court held was not that. Is not really anything that either side could really solidly use in their
Right.
argument. It kind of is a very narrow finding in that particular case based on the statute of Colorado.
So are you saying that that is a wrong decision and that the Baker should be made to make something that they feel is against their beliefs?
Well, how I thought, if the Supreme Court had actually grown a pair and made a decision, I think what they would have done would be to say that you can't force a business owner to do business with somebody that he doesn't want to do, but you cannot discriminate against people. So what that would have done would have had business owners just say, I'm not going to serve you.
And don't
without,
say why.
Yeah.
Okay. I can certainly agree with that. And, look, I think that they asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders to leave, and maybe they didn't say because you work for that man. I don't actually know. But what do you think about, from a legal standpoint and just opinion of asking her?
She believes that she did say the owner did tell her that it was because she believes she works for an unethical administration.
Right. Okay. So there you go. So she was given a reason. So does that go in basically against your thinking about the Baker?
It's hard for me to give a personal opinion on it because on one hand, like my first instinct is to say that it's at the discretion of the business owner. You should, if you disagree with what somebody is doing in their professional life, you have every right to say you can't. There's no legal. There's nothing.
She's not a member of a protected class. Like, to refuse to bake a cake based on sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is a protected class,
Right.
just as women in some cases are protected class and minorities are protected classes because they have immutable characteristics. This woman could choose to not work for this administration. So there is no protected class of, terrible presidents and their administrations. So if you choose to work for them and somebody wants to discriminate against you because of that, there's actually no unlawful discrimination.
Right, so just saying I don't
place.
like you is not discrimination.
Correct.
It's I don't like what you stand
But
for, and it's not I don't like your lifestyle or your skin color or whatever.
See, but I'm reluctant to full force say that, even though that's my instinct position, because of the fact that somebody's going to be like, well, I just don't like this person because
Sure.
of their
Well,
marriage preferences
right.
or their
And when you get into
religious organization,
when you
that
get
they
into
belong
precedence,
to.
that is where it can get slippery for when further decisions are made. And I think obviously it's tough to make the comparison to, well, what if somebody didn't want to serve President Obama? Because then it's like, even if you say it's because of his beliefs, he happened to be black. So you know what I mean? So it's hard to use that as a comparison. So I guess you could use Joe Biden as an example. I don't know what protected class he is.
I think the
Probably not a member
probably
of any protected class.
dullard or possibly, but
I think the most frustrating thing about this is when Sarah gave the press conference yesterday and immediately brought up the incident and then said that there was an Hollywood actor who tweeted to the public encouraging them to kidnap her children, which is wildly misleading. That's not at all.
right. That's wildly misleading, and that's sort of part of the next step of this conversation. Peter Fonda, who somehow can figure out how to tweet, I guess, since it's been a while since he's figured out how to get himself into a good movie, I suppose that he has plenty of time. One thing that I want to talk about, and I believe we have a video that ties into this, Tamra, so you let me know when it ties in. But what I want to say first is I know that this is the sort of thing that people hate about President Trump, and I know that you could very well be people in the studio. To me, I get up Monday morning, and all I can do is laugh that he's taken it upon himself to be Gordon Ramsay and tweet, The Red Hen restaurant should focus more on cleaning its filthy canopies, doors, and windows. Badly needs a paint job, rather than refusing to serve a fine person like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I get it. It's supposed to be beneath the president, but it made me laugh. There he is standing up for, somebody on his team. And he's within his rights to do that too. Of course, he has more important things to do. But when you think about it, he might have used that time to make a decision that, impacted millions of people, and some would say negatively. So at least he was there, making snide comments on Yelp, basically. I think he gave them a thumbs down on their Facebook page. So he really went for the hat trick there. Let's talk about this video we have of Sarah Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I did some investigating, and I found that Sarah Huckabee Sanders made a home video shortly after she and her husband got home from not being disinvited from the Red Hen restaurant. So this is something we stumbled across.
Found footage, as they say.
Good afternoon. After being asked to leave the Red Hen restaurant, my husband and I decided to go home, make a casserole, and watch The Patriot, which we do own on Blu-ray. At this time, I will share with you my recipe for Patriot casserole. First, you want to secure the borders of your pan so that no unlawful ingredients can cross over the border illegally. This administration has met with numerous chefs who overwhelmingly agree that the most important part of cooking is security. It is our job to enforce the laws of this recipe, which we have done successfully with our zero gluten tolerance policy. Preheat the oven to 375, which is the lowest temperature rate of any recipe in recent history. As for specifics on what exactly goes into this recipe, I refer you to the president's personal chef who has that information. With that, I will take your questions. Jill?
I like that Jill was there in the kitchen with her. It's always very informative.
That was awesome.
So then there's sort of the next level in the conversation, which was referenced by Tamra a moment ago. Peter Fonda wasn't talking about Sarah Sanders' kids. No, he's talking about President Trump's child. He said, quote, "We should rip Barron Trump from his mother's arms and put him in a cage with pedophiles and see if mother will stand up against the giant," oh yeah, we can swear, "giant asshole she is married to. 90 million people in the streets on the same weekend in the country. Fuck." Fonda wrote in a tweet, which has since been deleted.
I didn't see that one. I
Yeah.
saw another one.
Yeah. What was the, and obviously you're not going to have word for it, but generally, what did you think the other one said?
The other one said something about Sarah. It said something about if Sarah had been separated from her children.
Yes. And then this is the follow-up one.
Okay.
So this was the bigger one. So obviously, free speech, you can tweet whatever you want. Just don't be surprised when the Secret Service shows up at your house and says, "Hey, so you know that thing you advocate? Yeah, we're really concerned now." And obviously, Peter Fonda is not capable of. I mean, you're not even the most embarrassing member of that family. So obviously, he's not actually accomplished anything.
Whoa, Christian!
What? I'm just saying.
This was after the haven't been able to get yourself into a good movie. I mean, wow! What do you have it out for this man for?
Look, maybe I spent too much on Yuli's gold, all right? Maybe I'm holding it against him. But I'm glad you like that.
Good library. Just in your head, you were just able to pull that out.
Maybe I prepared for this. In any case, I think that, look, no, Peter Fonda's not going to go and try and kidnap Barron Trump. But again, you put ideas in people's heads when you say things like this. And the point you're trying to make, all you need to do is word it a little differently, actually, and you're fine. The Secret Service isn't going to show up. And it's like, we should rip. So that helps because it doesn't say like, I'm gonna go do it. But still, it's bad. But what's really bad, and this is what I'll sort of get both of your comments on overall, is Maxine Waters saying that people need to confront Trump administration staffers in public and let them know they're not welcome anywhere anymore, or anywhere. I switched them. And then she followed up later and said, "Look, I didn't say that anyone should hurt anyone." But that's the problem, is when you're encouraging people to get into people's face. Look, I would love to be wrong, but that sort of thinking, somebody's going to end up hurt at best. I think somebody could very well end up, seriously hurt. Somebody could end up killed. I mean, it's very dangerous, and it's dangerous because. Do you think Nancy Pelosi wanted to, get up that day and send a tweet that had to discourage someone from criticizing President Trump? No, she didn't want to have to do that, but she did. And, Maxine Waters has kind of doubled down on it. And I think that is a line where it's too far. You're saying, like, look, it's more like a peaceful protest to say, please, we're going to ask you to leave our restaurant. But when you go up to people when you see them in public, that's not saying like, hello, Miss Sanders, I would like you to know I disagree with your views. That probably means that you're going to get in their face and you're going to yell at them. And what if they're with their kids, and it's like a very threatening situation. Those are people that could find themselves arrested as well. So I don't think
find themselves arrested.
The people that are yelling at the staffers, especially
it happens to celebrities all the time.
And do you think that those people go home and
yeah, I mean, unless they make physical contact with somebody and are arrested for assault or battery.
So a famous person's kid goes to the same school as my kid, and there's a cop there every morning to make sure that he can get in and out because it happens, yes. And if something were to happen in that situation, do you think that police officer would say like, "Oh, sir, you're going to have to stop and just walk away"? I'm pretty sure he has handcuffs.
Can't do anything unless he does something like touches the kid.
Or the celebrity, if you get up in their face.
Right.
Yes. So
well, no, not in their face, because paparazzi does that to people all the time.
Sure.
It is when it makes contact when it, if you like, disrupt the flow of traffic in a street or cause some other, crime or traffic violation.
I don't think we're that far away from some kind of event being caused. And yes, maybe it's something that stops traffic. And I think that and look, here's another thing. Is that big righty hack David Axelrod went and said that this is the wrong message.
I know that was, obviously
I'm
sarcasm.
Summarizing it. Well, yes.
But it's noted, he's an of the older, more established guard, which does seem to think that way. So this is a bit of a difference between the younger, more activist, the more passionate, new to politics, and I've been around the block and rodeo a couple of times.
And I'm sort of jumping ahead, but I mean, this approach is definitely going to get this guy reelected. So you're definitely working against yourself. It's very sympathetic to be able to, in 2 more years, be able to cut together and look at all these things that people say and look at what they're doing. Look at what Peter Fonda, rest in peace. Look at what he tweeted when he was still alive, when his career was still alive. Look at what he tweeted about Barron Trump. So,
I don't think people care about that, because if people cared about what people said, grab them by the you-know-whats would have mattered to voters. People don't actually care about that.
But you're sympathizing the people that you vilify by going after them in public.
I don't see how Kristen Nielsen's a more sympathetic character because she got booed out of a Mexican restaurant.
Booed out of a Mexican restaurant is a little different. I'm less talking about Sarah Sanders than what Maxine Waters is telling people to do. Nothing has happened yet. Tamra, you keep trying to get in.
I reluctantly, because it's hard to formulate my thought. First of all, I feel like the nation needs a logic lesson. Like, we need to go back and do those logic problems, some SAT logic questions,
LSAT and logic problems.
And the reason I say that is because let's go back to that Peter Fonda tweet, Sarah claiming that he's publicly encouraging people to kidnap her children. Using that same logic, she has to admit that the administration is kidnapping immigrant children. Then if she's going, his tweet was making an analogy with what they're doing at the border. And she seemed to misinterpret that. So it's that sort of...
That's a very generous
lapse in logic that drives me crazy. I got into several discussions with Republicans last week on social media, and I was making very clear analogies, and the logic that people aren't able to have with A to C, and I'm not blaming Republicans, both sides. I just feel like just draw just draw parallels. That's all that you need to. We need to do those puzzles with the little grids where, you know, Ron is taller than Sally and he has a red shirt on. What color shirt is Sally wearing? Do we have enough information to determine that yet? Like those simple logic problems, so that Sarah cannot claim that somebody's encouraging her children to be kidnapped when that's not at all what the intention of that tweet was.
I'm very sorry, Tamara, but you're asking for education, and I don't see education as anywhere of a priority of this administration. So I think you're asking for a bit
Betsy
too
DeVos
much.
spends all day on education.
Oh,
I
yeah?
think it's a
Yeah.
high priority for
Really?
her.
Now, secondly, as much
That's
as
a better
I love,
joke than the Peter Fonda jokes.
as much as I love Aunt Maxine, I can't get enough of Maxine Waters. But I have to disagree with her on what she said, because of the fact that I think everybody needs to take steps to have peaceful conversations. Not everybody is crazy. On both sides, there are crazy people. On both sides, there are
good people on both
illogical
sides.
people.
Well, I mean, obviously,
and by both sides, I clearly mean Nazis and
No,
everyone
the
else.
incident that you're joking about, Chelsea, is obviously we're not necessarily good people on both sides. But to Tamara's overall point,
Meaning
yes,
Republican and Democrat on both
Yeah,
sides. There
yes.
are good people. There are reasonable people. There are unreasonable people on both sides. And it's frustrating, but we all need to make attempts to have productive conversations. And just because somebody voted differently than you and has this specific ideal, that doesn't mean, and I will further explain this, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're a bad person. And I say
Necessarily.
this because recently there's so many people who I've met recently who are good, big-hearted people who voted for Trump. And why did they vote for, which to me initially that feels like, how could this person have a moral conscience and vote for this man? But once you start talking to them, it's usually a matter of uninformed on a certain issue. They're not fully believing that something happened because their bias against the left is so strong that when something that clearly happened, they don't fully believe. There's various reasons why, but that's
they
important.
read an
to have-
article about the Clinton Foundation. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not have wanted to vote for Hillary.
Sure. I'm not saying that.
I was a Gary Johnson guy, as you remember, Chelsea. I was all Gary Johnson all the time during the election. Anyway, sorry, back to your point.
I'm just saying that we need to not make enemies and have productive conversations, and it is possible to do that. And to confront, even though confront is an innocuous word, it ultimately confront is fighting. That's aggressive to confront somebody. So I think that it's not a good idea. We need to,
My highest value around here is engagement in democracy. And if people do it a little wrong, they're a little too confrontational, they're too loud, they're, rude, I'm going to take that over sitting at home twiddling thumbs, not giving a rat's behind about anybody else unless some issue, intimately touches you or your own family. So I think I'm a
You
little...
would prefer for somebody to be radical than to be inactive? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I
And
think,
I don't mean
a little too loud is certainly right. I'm just saying when it gets to the level that, somebody's going to throw a brick through a window and then somebody's going to throw a Molotov cocktail through a window and then, just how it can snowball.
But not even that bad. Like, even
Yeah.
if it's just something like, how dare you? If I come at you with that tone, you're not going to listen to a
we're
thing
going to
that
learn.
I say.
We're
Like,
going to have to learn slowly but surely. But you're right about that. But sort of, there are people that are barely getting their sea legs of democracy. They're hardly showing up to vote. This is the first time that they're making their voices heard. They're not going to be articulate, at first. I mean, this is we have a teenage generation here who is learning how to do democracy, and it's going to be kind of ugly, a little messy, but I think engagement is more important than getting it right. However, nobody's calling here for violence. The only person that I've heard call for violence was when Trump was saying, I want to punch somebody in the face or take somebody down if they're throwing something like tomatoes at me. I think he said at one of his rallies, I'll pay your legal bills. That's the only time that I've heard anybody promoting violence. So that I would definitely agree, don't want to go there. But I'm okay with people being, in your face in public places. Listen, it happens to celebrities all the time, especially for ones that aren't holding town halls or making themselves available to be heard by members of the public. And especially when something so incredibly heinous is happening right at the moment, like the kids being separated from their parents, that is not a time where we should be overly critical of ourselves about how we confront these people and try and knock some sense into them.
Well, that's a poor choice of words, because if you're knocking sense into someone, I think that you're using your fists to do it.
I don't think so. I think
but
somebody,
no, I think you
can
mean
be,
talk some sense into them.
you can
let's
be
say.
knocked upside the head with
sense. Can we possibly
sense
hug some
without-
sense into someone?
There
can
we
we
go.
Can we
See,
hug
that's
some
all
sense?
I'm
I
saying.
think you
Thank
might.
you.
I think you might be able to do that with your own children, but I don't know if we're going to go around. You're gonna hug sense into Trump.
Stormy Daniels, sure. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say? Well, let me use an example of a story that I heard today that I think is a good example on how to do this. I only just heard this a little while ago, but I guess Seth Rogen was somewhere, and Paul Ryan's kids had gone up to him and they talked to him, and he was very nice and he talked to them. I think he took pictures with the kids, and then they said, "Oh, my dad wants to say hi," and he did. It's not like he didn't say anything to him, but when Paul Ryan asked if he could take a picture, he said, "You know what? No, because I am opposed to what you stand for." Blah blah blah. That's a great way to do it, because it's not the kid's fault who their dad is. That's, I've heard examples of that, though, where it's like, no, because one that I remember reading publicly was James Gandolfini. It was like, no, because your father is, a terrible person, or even worse than that. And I was just like, that's a great way to handle it. It's like, I respectfully decline the selfie for the congressman.
Yeah.
And here's why. And then, it's also, for Seth Rogen's point of view, there's no way that Paul Ryan enjoys his movies. But apart from that, there's no way he saw Pineapple Express and laughed. There's no way he understood what was supposed to be funny about
You
that
don't
movie.
think Paul Ryan was in the theater for the premiere of Sausage Party?
No, but he might have liked... It was a double bill with Yuli's Gold. Forgot about Sausage Party. Although he might have enjoyed the interview with the Kim Jong-un lookalike. But and I think that also, there's no way that picture being made public helps Seth Rogen in any way, because it's like, instead of saying like, yeah, you know what, I didn't want to be mean to a guy in front of his kids, it turns into, how dare you? So I get it. And I think that that's a great way to just be like, civilly say, I really disagree with your approach towards what you do for the country. I believe he also said, I can't wait until you're out of office, which, that's a little mean, but that's also the way he feels. No, that's fine. I'm saying that's absolutely fine, to air your concerns in that way. Now, and the final example that I really have that as it relates to politicians is something I made a joke about at the beginning of the show, but the protesters who confronted Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi outside of a screening of the Mr. Rogers documentary called Won't You Be My Neighbor? I was part of a review on it for Popcorn Talk Network, where I revealed that I cried 4 times.
Oh,
So
I really
a little
need to
something
see
to
that.
know. A little something to know, and I recommend that movie. It's an interesting film for the way that she was greeted outside of it. And one of the protesters was asked by a reporter, do you think that this is how Fred Rogers would handle this? And he's like, well, I'm not Mr. Rogers, so touche. But this is a group of people, I guess the word got out that she was seeing the movie, and they were waiting outside for her. So that's a step closer to what I'm talking about. I don't like, it's like 5 people. But, the idea that mobs might start gathering for where there have been sightings and waiting for people, and, you have time for your anger to build up. And not that anything happened here. She had, law enforcement with her. It's fine. It's just more the idea. It's not even so much this instance. It's like another step down the road where you're just like, well, what happens next? So, Chelsea, you hear all these stories, and it's all very circumstantial, counselor, so I'm not trying to find anyone guilty of anything. But what do you think when you hear all of this?
I am glad that people are making their voices heard, especially, again, they were confronting her about something related to the child separation, because she was... Refresh my memory.
Well, I think that they were upset. I thought that they were upset about the pre-existing
conditions
That's right.
and the
That's
healthcare.
right. So this is something that's happening sort of like right now. and actually, while it's like we're all upset about the children being separated, which we very much should be, there's other dangers, there's other things being stripped, there's other things being changed sort of behind the scenes now that we're paying attention.
In her case of this crowd, it seemed like a bipartisan issue. It wasn't, talking about her healthcare plan removing the pre-existing condition stipulation. That seemed like a bipartisan issue. So
whether it's bipartisan or not, the people should still be heard on it. And I don't know if she does any town halls on that. I don't think that she does. So where do people get to be heard? And they know that they're, Attorney General, most people don't really vote for Attorney General. They are not usually informed enough about what somebody stands for when somebody's running. It's a really, really important job, and people, I would encourage them to really look up the candidates for Attorney General, but it's not one of the sexier, positions that gets really well researched.
If you mention Attorney General to people, they might think like, oh, those are those warnings on cigarettes. Those are from the Attorney General, right?
Sure.
And that's about it. And so, right, you don't think about it, but it does have major repercussions for how we live. And something like this pre-existing, is she listening? Is she taking any thoughts from constituents or anybody? I don't really think so. So if this is the only way that they can be heard is by waiting for her outside a movie and letting them know what they think, fine.
I'm
I don't
curious
see
if
the harm in it.
If the protesters would have come, should she have been going into, despite our joke at the top of the show, but if she were seeing Jurassic World, for example, because when I first read the story, I thought it was specifically because of the fact she was going to see such a sympathetic movie, a movie that was
that's like the picture of Ivanka with her child that led to Samantha Bee using the C word. It's like, how dare you have love for a child when there are children suffering in the world? You weren't here that week.
Wait, that's why Samantha Bee
Yes.
used the C word? I thought it was because she
like,
didn't say anything to her dad.
Well, that's what she turned it into was, instead of talking about the joys of motherhood, why don't you stand up to your father's immigration policy, you feckless C word.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So again, there it is. You don't get it quite right, but I am glad that she said something.
Oh, well, she's not glad she said it because she had to.
She's not glad that she said that word,
yeah.
but
so,
I don't know
and
how
her
much.
network's not glad she said it because,
I didn't say that she should be glad that she said that word.
Right.
I am glad that she spoke up. Should she have used a different word? Yes, absolutely. But we're not going to get it right. And so right off the bat. And so I don't think we should say, see, people are doing it wrong. Shut it down. Go home. Go back to your couches. Twiddle your thumbs until November and then vote and then, shut up the rest of the time. That isn't how democracy works. Democracy works when people are engaged all the time. Yes, it's important to show up at the ballot, at the ballot box, but it's also important to speak up in between.
Yeah, it just seems like obviously President Trump and his policies are a very unique set of circumstances, but he's so much in people's head that it's not like, there weren't calls to like, if you see a George W. Bush staffer, you should
Exactly.
go up to them at a restaurant. You used to be able to disagree with people. Now, I don't think you can.
When they're doing things like separating children, or they're going to leave millions of people without health insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. These things should be infuriating to people, and they should stand up for themselves. There's once we can debate about this general size of the military and the kinds of regulations that are appropriate and a good balance between environment and business, and we can debate about those kinds of things. But like, if somebody took your kid, do we want to sit here and just debate it, or there's time for debate is a little over. A decision has been made, and we have to rectify that decision as soon as humanly possible. We have to try and stop things from happening that are on the cusp of happening, like pre-existing conditions being a thing again.
Right.
So this is the same thing. So when football players take a knee to peacefully protest police killing unarmed men and women of color, but that's disloyal to the flag. What kind of civil disobedience did you want? And there was no answer. So this idea now that we should, go towards civility is a whole bunch of baloney from the side that really shuts down any form of civil disobedience.
Also, you cannot call for civility when
you
the
are
president of the free world is
incivility in
capable of
chief.
saying the things that he is saying. I mean, we are in uncharted waters at this point in history because of the
Some
fact
would
of
say
what
we are in Maxine waters. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad Chelsea liked that, because it was like I really was going to step on what Tamra was saying just for a bad joke. Anyway, I will let you finish your point. I just had to get my
I just
bad
don't
joke in.
see how if you are a supporter of President Trump, the vile things that have come out of this man's mouth
Or thumbs.
have set tiny thumbs, has set such a precedent as to how to proceed that you have no right to tell anybody to be civil if you are supporting the king of incivility.
Right. Do we have any comments from people? I would really like to know where
believe
people
me,
are on this.
I will let you know when we have good comments.
Oh, but we don't have any good
But
ones.
special hi
Good comments.
to William Winters
Have
in the
we had
chat, who is
uncivil
our favorite
comments?
show. I'm so glad you watch every week, William Winters.
Hi, William.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to sort of mention, though, is that, yes, obviously Donald Trump is being very hypocritical when he calls for civility. He's not the only one. There are other people whom I've referenced. And I guess, we can just remember that quote from Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go lower. So obviously that's what she feels that people should be doing in this situation. So let's everyone look to a first lady that people on that side did actually like. And another instance we have is this intern for Senator Maggie Hassan, who was suspended after cursing at President Trump. And some say she should be fired. Some say she shouldn't have been suspended. Obviously, there needs to be some kind of, you have to be reprimanded if you're working and representing an elected official, sharing a belief that, the person that you're working for might not have that belief. They probably do, but they might not have it. And you were definitely within your rights, but who gets fired from an internship? I mean, you don't even get paid. But anyway, and it's just, it's setting a bad example, because when you work in Washington, I have a lot of people who are not career politicians, but career federal employees. You work for a lot of people. You work for people you agree with. You work for people you're kind of, in between. And you work for people you just can't stand anything they say, and you can't wait till they're gone. But you have to work for them. And there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to it. So I'm just saying that as a private citizen, a non-elected individual, although I did appoint myself chairman of the Trump Report, thank you very much. I'm just saying that if people feel that the exchange of the loss of civility for making your points, it's fine. And I'm not talking about just saying, like the Seth Rogen example, I don't think is particularly rude.
Hold on a sec. I didn't say loss of civility.
Well, I see it coming. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're getting very close. That's why I wanted to talk about this for almost the whole show. But anyway, and sort of a separate issue that only tangentially connects to this, but I did want to get our resident legal expert on this. I assume everybody saw the video over the weekend of Permit Patty, and that's not her real name, but I don't need to give her, she's had enough troubles. I don't think she needs me to give her real name, where she appeared to call the police on the little girl selling a bottle of water without a permit.
While she herself was selling weed, was that correct?
Yeah, so she was, it's not like she's a street dealer. It's not like, hey, this is my corner, I'm selling weed, don't sell water here, it's bad for business.
That's like
by the way,
symbiotic relationship.
That's
right
like
there.
selling chocolate and peanut butter together. Two great tastes that taste great together. If only there was a Girl Scout cookie booth right next to it, that would have been perfect. But it's just, and look, for her sake, the one thing that I'll give her, white woman of some privilege, looking at her now deleted Instagram photos, pretending to call the police on a young African-American girl. The optics of that are never going to work out for you. So you should, basically when the other person started filming you, that was probably the time like, I just got to let this one go. This is not going to end well for me. But I think she just felt like I don't understand why this is such an important point. I'm going to ask you, Chelsea.
I have no idea
If
either.
you see a kid selling, like in Los Angeles after a concert or a sporting event, there's always people outside selling things. And sometimes you see the police, they grab them and they make them like throw away the hot dogs wrapped in bacon, which obviously Chelsea would never eat. But, you know, they're selling those things, you know, and I always feel bad when I see the police are making them throw away all the stuff because, you know, who knows how much they had to spend to make those things or to buy
Just
those waters.
wasting food.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor
They
animals.
should confiscate it and, you know, bring it to a homeless shelter. I'm just coming up with an idea.
I just don't
here.
know who these. As a white person, I don't know any other white people. Like, who are these?
By the way, I didn't even realize you were white. I don't see color, so I'm glad you finally went on record for that.
Barbecue Becky and Permit Patty. Like, who are these people? I'm like, I can't even get into your head to understand what your issue is. I'm so confused by their motive and by what's driving them and who are. I don't even know anybody who would do this.
I
Who
guess
are
this
these
is what
people?
happens when you are afraid of the competition. I don't know.
I mean, I guess.
I mean,
I don't know, but
Did Permit Patty give any reason what her issue was?
when she initially tried to do it, she just said that she was upholding the letter of the law. She didn't feel like...
So there's another one of those, I am a law and order kind of person,
It's so
selectively.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, can we... I can't believe we're... Can we go into the... I thought you were going to ask me about the Supreme Court
No,
decision.
I do want to get to that too.
Okay.
But I had this first, just because...
Order, priorities, values, people.
Well, because it's a good video. But no, I tied into that. So there are two things that the Supreme Court has sided with. And I'm going to admit there's one that I don't understand. And I want you to explain to me what the ruling was. So with the, and this is what the headline is from NPR, the conservative outlet, the Supreme Court sides with California anti-abortion pregnancy centers. So explain what that ruling is, because I read it, and the first time I read it, I thought that it said the opposite of what it did, and I'm like, no, I don't think I got that right, and I reread it, and then I think I understand it now.
It's more complicated than it has to be. I don't think that in effect it will have much consequence, because I think they're just going to rewrite the way that the law is written, and therefore it'll get around the objections that the Supreme Court had to it by just narrowly focusing it on these non-profit pro-life centers. So if the law had been aimed at a more a wider I don't know, just in general, any clinics providing any advice on reproduction, I mean, if they had just really generalized it more, then the Supreme Court's arguments about it not being that it sort of discriminating against this small group of nonprofits that helps with pregnancy crisis would have been averted. But basically what they said is that this law that said, listen, if you are providing pregnancy crisis advice, you need to let people know that they have options, including abortion, that there are low and free medical services and resources for them.
Right, and they're saying that your advice should include that. So if you want to also talk about adoption, you know, that's perfectly
right. But
okay.
that the law says that they must include that language.
Right.
And so therefore these organizations
The new
are like,
ruling is saying that it
no, that's what
must-
the California law said. If you want to provide pregnancy crisis counseling, you need to include this advice about abortion. And these groups obviously are very anti-abortion, so they're arguing, wait a minute, what about my free speech and my freedom of religion, that I do not want to promote abortion, things of that nature, or birth control or anything
So
like
they're
that.
against just being awareness that it's an option.
So yes, that they are being forced to say something that they have a First Amendment disagreement with. They don't want to be, it's essentially what they said, it's forced speech. So they're having to say something that violates what they believe in. That part is fine. That somewhat makes sense. But there's a second part of it that talks about how if they're not licensed medical facilities, that they needed to tell people, we're not licensed medical facilities. And even that was struck down, which was bizarre to me. So I think anti-abortion people are going to be kind of excited about this, but I think that just rewriting the law is going to take care of this. I don't think that this one is going to be long-term
so you
Can you
consequential.
reread the headline?
Yeah, and what I'll do is, just in case I transcribed it incorrectly, I'm going to go ahead and click on the link and let it open. Supreme Court sides with California anti-abortion pregnancy centers.
So these anti-abortion centers are these.
They try to prevent someone from choosing an abortion
Yeah.
by not offering that as a choice.
Yes.
So California sided with the people saying we don't want to have
No.
to.
California had a law that said you must tell
Right,
people
so-
about these options, and the Supreme Court said, no, California, you cannot force these organizations to say something that they
Right,
don't want to
and
say.
a lot of times these would be, just using an example, but say it was at like a St. Joseph's Hospital, which would be like a Catholic-leaning hospital. They would prefer not to encourage you to get an abortion, and the Supreme Court is saying that's okay. But what Chelsea's saying is that it's fine that the Supreme Court ruled on this. California can then make another law that will sort of, in a different way, enforce this. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
or?
it has to deal more with the second one, which had to do with the telling people that they're not a licensed medical
Right.
facility. I think actually that this would all be moot if we finally, in California, we start here with single payer. And I think the very, very thing that we should start with on single payer is free birth control for everybody, so that hopefully we have fewer people in pregnancy crisis situations, and that this is much less of an issue. That is the day that I look forward to.
But going back to what Christian, so what's an example of the way California may circumvent the Supreme Court's ruling and make it so that these centers have to inform patients of this option?
They're probably not going to specifically be able to tell these organizations, you must say this.
But we can put a sign on the wall.
I'm not sure. I do think that there is something that they can do with respect to the language that will, or we change our entire medical
Right.
system, which I think probably will happen first. But there is somewhat of a valid point, is you cannot make somebody say something that they don't want to say. And but the unfortunate thing is that these organizations are also lying to people, maybe about, I don't say that maybe, I say it, I have read, it is reported that these organizations lie to people about what their options really are. So there is another way to crack down.
For
on
example,
these.
if somebody's pregnant, their life was in danger, like an abortion could potentially save the mother's life. That's maybe an instance where.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, because you have people that feel like even in that case, it's still a problem. I do want to talk to you about the other court case, but I do have two comments from the chat. Our friend Lady Goth in the chat, this is sort of referring back to our earlier conversation. She predicts some kind of violent killing in the future, or a riot.
What
Something
about,
I
like,
don't. Let me finish the comment. Something I don't know why I feel it in my bones. So she was just sort of reacting to what I was saying. Now, what did you think of that?
Well, it already has happened. Do you remember what was her name? Heather, who was killed by the crazy guy who ran through the crowd, who drove through the crowd. This is when
Don't remember this.
Trump said there are
specifically.
fine people on both sides.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I know what you're talking about.
So
yes. Okay.
It has already happened, and it's probably why you're getting a sense that that is going to happen, because it has happened, and the rhetoric and the behavior of this administration is only gotten more infuriating. So I don't think that she's wrong.
And our friend R. Scott Brown says, funny how street dealers are criminal and dispensary owners are entrepreneurial. And Lady Goth amends her comment. It says, I mean another one. She feels that something else is coming, in light of what we're talking about. So there's another ruling from the Supreme Court upholding the Trump travel ban, which President Trump, that is, he stated that they ruled that way, and he followed it up with, wow. And that was it.
Even he was shocked.
Yeah.
Or he didn't understand what the Supreme Court said.
Both of those things could be true.
Yeah.
He could be shocked and not understand it as well. Anyway, so, we do only have a few minutes, but I wanted to give you a chance to explain and also comment on that ruling from the Supreme Court.
Well, very briefly, it just seems that the justices who voted with the majority opinion believed that this was a national security issue, whereas those who dissented believed that this is actually a discrimination issue. So whatever side you believe, whichever argument you believe was the basis for this travel ban is the way that they sort of voted. So if they thought that, yes, they believed that the language, which by the third time was sufficiently cleaned up of its blatant xenophobia, passed their muster for, yes, the president has pretty wide latitude on things regarding national security. The other justices who are like, we are not buying this BS. We know what this is really about, dissented.
So, your reaction to it, is it a significant ruling, or are they just sort of saying like, okay, you can do this?
I think it's significant because it's so bizarre that they, I don't know if it's that bizarre because after all, it is a conservative court now, would ignore everything that Trump said and would look at the letter of the law. You know, this is like Brown versus the Board of Education that overruled segregation. Before that, there was a case that said, yes, separate but equal, fine. So the letter of the law can look just fine and not discriminatory at all, but its effect is discriminatory, and then it can be ruled unconstitutional later when people are like, hello, listen, even though the law says nothing about being discriminatory, look at the effect that it's actually having. Will that happen here? I don't think so. It's hard to see how the travel ban is going to look anything like so obvious as the way a separate but equal looked. So it's significant in that the court is going to buy what the letter of the law says without looking behind the curtain, so to say.
Just another comment from our Scott Brown, who we often point out is not former Senator Scott Brown. The Muslim ban failed twice. In the wake of failures, it was reverse engineered in language, travel ban, and scope, adding North Korea and Venezuela to make it constitutional within the context of the ability of the office of the presidency to enact policy for national security reasons. However, spurious in this instance, the fact that he used the word spurious is a great way.
I don't know what that word means.
It is similar to specious. No, actually, I'm not sure. I think it means like dubious, but our Scott Brown, you let me know if I'm using that word wrong.
And I would agree with this analysis.
I thought you would. That's why I read it. And this is why you like the comments, because sometimes they say what you're the inside voice.
I even like comments that disagree with what I'm saying, where there is a respectful, back and forth and an opportunity to say something. When somebody is just so blatantly ignorant and not willing to be informed at all, then I'm not interested.
We get people like that in the chat.
Now, remind me, for the ban on these countries, that means, so we're upholding that certain countries will be banned from coming to the United States. But isn't that's excluding the ones that if you have an immediate family member here?
It was originally brought by somebody who was trying to figure out what exactly does that mean, and I don't know if it was.
I wonder what was cleaned up in the language.
There's nothing that it's going to be cleaned up, but they would. I don't know if it was even really addressed. The court will sometimes do that.
Let us know, if you're those of you watching after the fact, your thoughts on any and everything that we've talked about. You can comment on our YouTube page for this episode, and you can also tweet us at Trump Report ABTV. Now we have 3 minutes, so I wanted to mention something from the top of the show, and that was President Trump threatening Harley Davidson that if it moves its operations overseas, they will be taxed like never before. You can argue with how successful a businessman as President Trump was in the private sector, but he's always been a businessman. So all of a sudden now he has a problem with companies moving overseas to save money. I find that to be interesting. I think that...
Interesting. Well, that was such a mild word, Christian.
Ironic?
Hypocritical,
Spurious?
I think, is the word that you're looking at.
I don't think I use spurious correctly. Specious. No, but my point is that I see this as the, if they do that, that's embarrassing him. You know, that's like the old, hey man, not in front of my girl, you know? It's like that. It's like, hey, not while Pence is looking. So I don't know. Tamra, what do you think of that approach? And is it specious in nature?
It's dubious. I wonder how this is going to play out, because I suspect that there's a lot of Harley Davidson owners who are Trump supporters and don't know whose side to be on with this. So I'm curious where those people are going to land, because a lot of the
They've already got their Harley. They don't care how much it costs.
I don't know about that. I feel like anybody, their guy is saying disparaging things against their brand. I feel like a lot of people are being torn right now. So I'm
So
curious.
far, what I've read is people are really not sure what to. They're like, I 100% support my president and my Harley. So they don't know really what to do with it.
So I was really hoping I could tie it all together. I did some quick research, and I wanted to see if the motorcycles from Easy Rider, the movie that Peter Fonda was in, if they were Harley Davidsons, but they were not. They were custom made, and they're not associated with any brand. Chelsea, we do have to wrap up. So whatever you had that you wanted to say, can you keep it in your head for 2 weeks, because we will not be here next Tuesday.
This is tragic.
So
it was about Tamra's homework.
Tamra's homework. All right, very quickly, 30 seconds.
Remember, she had homework.
Oh, I don't think. Well, you're gonna put her on the spot and see if she did it, or you did it. You did the homework?
I did different homework that Chelsea is aware of.
All right. Well, we'll talk about the homework in 2 weeks, because
what a bummer.
as I was referencing, we will not be here next week because, contrary to the belief of some people in the chat, we do love America, and
So we have to take 2 days
We
off?
need to take a long weekend that
Starting on Tuesday?
maybe starting on Friday. You don't know what I'm doing, but we will be back on July 10th. And I actually think Scott will not be back yet. He's away. He's out of pocket.
I will
for
be
a
a
while.
whole nother year older by then.
Happy birthday to Chelsea.
yay.
And you can follow us until then at Christian DMZ. And where do they find you, Tamra?
Hey, find me on YouTube at Hey Tamra. If you liked that video, there's more where that came from. Like and share, etc.
And Chelsea.
Just at Chelsea Glacia.
That's great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being in the chat. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Have a great afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.